Episodes like these are very easy to mess up, and it's not even just if you're going for an Inception-like story where reality is such a twisting and turning event that you can't really put your finger on what is real and what is altered. It's a story in general that has a lot of complex ideas. Typically, what we just saw with episode 10 of Invaded, we would normally see at the episode 11 point of a 12 episode series. And the reason it usually fails, not because the idea is bad, but because there isn't enough time to flesh out the remaining, like, oh shit, I see what you're going for, but you're only giving me one more episode to wrap it all up. But the fact that Invaded, we just got that with episode 10 of a 13 episode series. We have 3 more episodes left to conclude this. I absolutely have full faith they can do so, because usually I'm used to a single episode trying to tie up all the loose ends. But the fact that we have basically an hour to do so, basically the equivalent of a shorter movie, absolutely they can. It's going to be amazing to see what's going to happen, and I'll be honest, throughout watching this episode, up to the point Hondo popped up, I was starting to buy into what if everything we were seeing beforehand was not actually the real reality. I was thinking to myself, what if, Saikato, obviously he would want this to be real because his family's around, but it just kind of felt like with what this girl was saying and how her abilities were altering, and just, it kind of felt like this could be the reality and what is going to happen next. And then when you get that shattering realization that no, we were just being like him, wishing that the family could still be around, and the real person is most likely asleep in a chamber, and when he goes to bed, he'll be looking up at a dark ceiling in a prison cell with pictures surrounding him. And the way they directed that moment when he starts to realize as he's basically going through the flashback, I didn't even realize it was the photos of basically all the pictures that he has in his cell. But the fact that we're just seeing the marriage, the childbirth, and just all the different moments throughout his life, the happiest points of his life, and then they start cutting into the actual pictures in the cell, that was one of the most dramatic and heartbreaking pieces of directing that this anime season has had. It's very simple in design, but that simplicity, holy shit, did it do wonders, because I think I can probably speak for many people. We probably were questioning, is this actually the real reality? And as things started happening more and more, we were starting to realize and try to push back, saying, no, this has to be the real reality. And then you start seeing the flashback, you start seeing all the different pictures, the points in time, and then it becomes a picture on a wall, and you're like, God damn it. We got bought into the fairy tale all along. Last week, I thought it was going to be exactly that. Like, we were fighting like, oh no, this is absolutely the real reality. But the way they directed it was to make us feel like, no, this is obviously just another well or something like that, and we're just starting to really piece it together with the real outside world. But then this episode did the complete opposite into just making us feel like this has to be real. This has to be the real truth, and we want it to be so. And the fact that it wasn't, I think, was the most appropriate route to go down. And we still don't know everything about this world, where the real Kairu is, and the whole battery operation, how she's basically harvesting and doing everything with these wells in general. But the fact that they didn't forget about Hondo, they didn't forget about all the characters in general, I think often is a mistake a series like this would have, where you're saying that we basically have 3 central main characters. We have Momoki, we have, of course, Akata, we have Hondo, and then we even have, people like Anado. And just, like, those are a lot of characters, especially when you're basically trying to put the focus and the emphasis on saying, hey, this main character's family is back, let's focus on this, let's, John Walker, what's going on here? But the fact that after 10 minutes he was extracted from the well, obviously not the most appropriate time based on what was happening. The fact that Hondo, her well within a well linked up here, and that was causing such conflict, and how reality is basically shattering, which, Kairu did say it was going to shatter, so, it did happen. It's nice to see that things just weren't forgotten, but it was nice that he's able to toss out his notebooks of notes about John Walker before he was sucked out of existence. And the twist that happened in the desert, I have to say, I didn't see coming, and I don't think many people probably did. The idea of John Walker most likely being the bearded white man in the organization, I think is most likely what's happening here. And I'm sure if that is the case, some people will say that's too obvious and that's an issue, but the thing with it is honestly the identity of John Walker matters very little to me. I don't care if it's someone who I could pick out in a crowd at a visual glance before the reveal came. I personally care about the motivation and reasons for why he became John Walker. And as long as that's interesting, honestly, the identity could be someone we haven't met or someone we clearly have met. It's like, well, of course, look at a visual level. It's an anime character. We're watching an anime story. Of course, that was going to be the big bad villain. But for these characters, this isn't an anime story. They have no reason to just assume that the most obvious person, if you are writing it in a story setting, was going to be the big bad villain. But the fact that they twisted it with Anado and how, because he had a bullet in his head, basically, a part of his brain's gone, that he is so immune that he keeps his memory going in the fact that he was working with John Walker. I bought into the whole idea of their friendship in the desert. It felt like had they, been a little different, had they met before everything went to shit, they could have been best friends in a lot of ways. He was just teasing us. He was playing with us all this time. And the fact that now they finally met face to face. We have Hondo searching for, of course, John Walker in her own reality that she's fighting with. Then we have, of course, Hikato now having to go up against him in the desert, can extract, and what's happening in the real world. There's so much happening here, and it just feels like if this was episode 11 of a 12-episode series, there would be no chance in hell, even if it was a double-length episode, to wrap everything up, because there's just too many things left to explore. You can tell the endgame's here, you can tell all the pieces are finally falling into place, but you need at least 3 episodes to do it all, and I'm glad that we're getting that. I think this is definitely the appropriate pace series where it's not too long, not too short. I've seen some people say they wish it was like a 2-core, a 24-episode, a 26-episode series. But honestly, I don't think it needs to be that long. I honestly feel like 13 episodes. It was around, I'd say, probably episode 5, episode 6, right? I was like, 13 episodes sounds about right. But once we really got a good idea of John Walker, and we started to understand the more Inception-style story that I was going for, it totally makes sense to me that 13 to 15 episodes would all a series like this really needs to be at the end of the day. And as long as they stick to the ending and land all the final points, I have no issues with this being 13 episodes. And I'm glad that they're running with seemingly the episode count that they want. They could have easily just said it's going to be a 12-episode series, or they could have easily said it's going to be a 24. But 13 episodes, it's a little different, but I mean, just that extra episode, it clearly means to me that they know what they're doing with the ending. And based on how everything has been progressing so far, it definitely feels to me that there's been a good plan, objective, and trajectory, and I don't think they're going to mess it up in my honest opinion. And I know there's always this, thing with media culture. Anytime, it happened when Lord of the Rings was first coming out, it happened when Inception came out, and it feels like anytime there's, a big movie, a big TV show, a book, or whatever it is, really blows up to, mainstream culture. I feel like what happens is for, 10 years, anything with a similar idea or similar aesthetic or something like that will basically always get compared to it. And I myself have been saying Inception, because I feel like it's the easiest way to get across what I'm talking about because people just know it even if they haven't seen the movie. But the thing with it is I honestly feel like a lot of people, once they see a Lord of the Rings or they watch an Inception or, they watch a gritty, dark superhero movie, they just say, well, that one did it, so now you have to be completely different. But that's not true. Just because Inception had a cool idea doesn't mean other stories can't use that idea, or just the idea that it was kind of aiming for, do it in a completely different way. While the overall idea of the well within a well is similar to Inception on a base design, in terms of the story that we're seeing with Invaded, it is completely different and far more interesting if I'm being 100% honest. It happened so much when Lord of the Rings was coming out, where basically any new movie with elves or dwarves or things like that would be oh, it's a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. They didn't even watch it, they just saw a trailer and they're like, nope, the aesthetic looks a little too similar to me. And I don't know why it happens, and I feel like the only people who are ripping into it as being an Inception ripoff are people who aren't even watching Invaded. I feel like just based on the tweets or just the comments that I'm seeing, it just feels like it's being said by someone who has no experience with Invaded, because if you watch it, while there's definitely similarities in certain designs, it is completely different and unique if I'm being 100% honest. Which is why I think so many people who have been following Invaded have been loving it more and more as the weeks progress, because rather than this just being you watch up till episode 6 or 9 or something like that and you say, okay, I saw the big moment and that's all it had all along, but all the smaller moments before it were just lame and boring. No, I think people for the most part have been enjoying each episode as a case-by-case basis, and we clearly were building up to a bigger punchline, and based on how everything is now clicking and releasing the most devastating storm, all the pieces, whether familiar or unique, they just are combining into being Invaded, not a ripoff of this or a ripoff of that or a generic mess of this. No, it feels like Invaded, and as long as the final 3 episodes go out with an absolute bang like the past couple have, this will be an amazing series going out, and if the final few episodes suck or just aren't as good, it'll still be a great show nonetheless. I mean, when we can have 10 episodes that is just blowing our mind and just seeing so many things, even a couple of faulty missteps isn't going to ruin it, at least for myself. And this episode, it was interesting. It was emotional. It was a slower pace for a bit, but it just felt like it was trying to convince us that this is real. That maybe everything we were seeing up to that point was fake, and we wanted it to be fake. And just to see how people just wanted death and release, or just how you just try your best to take out all the killers that you know how to take out. And if you can get that John Walker, everything will be fine. And a girl saying, no, I will always be a threat and it's going to destroy the world. Like, what do you do at that point except just try to hold on to your fantasy and refuse to swallow the pill that's so hard to swallow, which is reality in general. Reality generally has a bitter truth to it, and I think this episode, that was its entire point, that, you know, one day you would come home, your daughter would be dead. Another day you'd come home, your wife would be dead. You then become a lunatic maniac who's then a purpose and a tool for the government to use, and then you someday wake up and your family's there. Of course, you're not going to want to just say, this isn't real. Eventually, if you've been here for over a month and then you stumble into your old coworker saying, no, it's been like 20 minutes, what are you talking about? The dates aren't lining up. You're going to not want to accept it, and that's why that phone call at the end was so powerful. Invaded is fantastic, but I mean, I think we all know that at this point in time. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think? Theories and speculations? Do let me know. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you're happy new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.